Hello, Commissioner. This is the Ana Garcia case wrap-up and conclusions. The claim that I concluded to is that Ana Garcia's death was resulted by an overuse of caffeine in her body, in addition to the use of opiates, specifically fentanyl and acetylsalicylic acid, also known as aspirin, which affected her blood pressure and heart rate. The mixed use of these substances led Ana Garcia to endure the effects of drowsiness, dizziness, and disorientation, which in result led to her fall, in which she hit her head against the lab station. Once she hit her head against the lab station, Ana Garcia faced traumatic brain injury, TBI, which led to an instant death due to the damage of her brain tissue and bleeding of blood vessels into her brain tissues. The evidence that supports this claim are the decedent's blood tissue samples under a microscope, the toxicology report, and the blood spatter pattern, that being force and direction spatters that only occur if an external force is applied. Additional evidence includes the open wound on Ana Garcia's forehead and the bruise on her right eyebrow that was examined in the external examination, the social media timeline, and the photos of the scene. Here's the evidence board. The mechanism of her death was blunt force trauma as a result of the intake of a large amount of caffeine and other substances, which led to high blood pressure and increased heart rate. Ana Garcia experienced 2 occasions of blunt force trauma. Once when she bumped into Sam Green at soccer practice, resulting in a bruise above her right eyebrow, and a second time, the cause of her death, when she fell as a result of dizziness and hit her head on the lab station table. The decedent had taken opiates, specifically fentanyl and aspirin, following her first encounter with blunt force trauma to assist in relieving the pain of the migraine headaches she had been experiencing, but unknowingly, she was consuming large and lethal amounts of caffeine. The mix of these substances led her blood pressure to increase significantly, causing the arteries that supply blood to her heart to narrow, making it difficult for the heart to get blood from the arteries, increasing her heart rate dangerously and leaving more work to the heart as it had to attempt to pump harder and faster. Due to these effects that the substances had on her, she became dizzy, lightheaded, and uncoordinated to the point where she fell forward, hitting her head on the lab station table in an act of blunt force trauma. The manner of the decedent's death was accidental. In the 2 times that the decedent experienced blunt force trauma, they were both unplanned and sudden. The evidence that this death was accidental is that there was no suicide note left behind, which is always an indicator when a suicide occurs. The decedent was also not aware of the lethal amounts of caffeine she was consuming, as she posted a social media post titled "How much espresso is too much?" indicating that she had no idea of the lethal amounts she was consuming and the effects that they could have on her. The cause of Ana Garcia's death was traumatic brain injury, TBI, in which was led to by the intoxication of several substances, including an extremely high and potentially lethal amount of caffeine, opiates, and fentanyl. Opiates, specifically fentanyl, and aspirin. The mixture of these substances led her blood pressure to dangerously increase and for her heart rate to dangerously increase. While the blood pressure and irregular heart rate did not kill her, it caused her to fall due to the dizziness she was experiencing and ultimately hit her head on the lab station table to cause the TBI that would lead to her death. Once the decedent hit her head against the table in the lab, this resulted in a second case of TBI, which was extremely severe, causing the blood vessels in her brain to further bleed into the brain tissues, resulting in an automatic death as the brain was swollen and bruised in the frontal lobes, completely stopping the brain from functioning as it should. The traumatic brain injury caused immediate brain and nerve damage, which ultimately killed Ana Garcia. We have come to the conclusion that there were no suspects involved in the death of Ana Garcia. Therefore, Commissioner, my conclusion is that due to the 2 times that Ana Garcia suffered from blunt force trauma, she suffered from severe brain injury, along with brain and nerve damage. This severe brain injury is known as traumatic brain injury, TBI, and was caused by the 2 times that the decedent encountered blunt force trauma. The decedent's use of substances after her first encounter with blunt force trauma were the leading factors to Ana Garcia's death, as these substances were the reason why the decedent became dizzy, drowsy, and uncoordinated. Once the decedent faced the effects of these substances, she fell in the lab, hitting her head extremely harshly on the laboratory table, causing blunt force trauma, which quickly led to traumatic brain injury. The traumatic brain injury caused blood vessels in the decedent's brain to begin to bleed into the brain tissues, quickly stopping and disrupting the normal and extremely important functions of her brain and nervous system, and ultimately leading her body to come to a point where life was no longer sustainable. Thank you for listening, Commissioner.